This is in reference to Max Blumenthal. So I don't know if everyone's aware, but apparently the GrayZone had ran into an issue with GoFundMe. So this whole situation is giving me pause because I use GoFundMe for mutual aid. So that's actually how we paid for the barbecue, the community barbecue that we did. So I may have to switch to something else. I may have to switch to something else for the next mutual aid event. But what happened to the GrayZone in reference to GoFundMe, it wasn't even a matter of GoFundMe not allowing them to receive donations. It was a matter of they had donations and GoFundMe would not let them cash out. So, this is one of those moments, there's Sabrina and there's Sabby. This is one of those moments where I think Sabrina would have came out. And Sabrina's a little bit different than Sabby. And Sabrina would have came out and said, give me my damn money. Like, seriously, like I would have lost it because they raised thousands of dollars and they were doing this fundraiser, not just to keep the GrayZone going, but also because they did want to hire two of their contributing journalists, Wyatt Reed and Alex Rubenstein. They wanted to hire them on full time. So that's why they were trying to raise this money. At one point, I saw they had raised over like $90,000. Could you imagine? Listen, I am a nice person. And you guys see me get riled up a little bit of time. I get passionate sometimes on this show and I let it out. But if I had $90,000 that I needed that money to pay people and GoFundMe cut off my access to get that money, you would have seen Sabrina 2.0 come out, and she has not been unleashed in a couple of years. But Max Blumenthal did explain this in a little bit more detail. He was actually on Glenn Greenwald's show, which Glenn Greenwald's been getting a lot of play this past week. He was on Glenn Greenwald's show System Update to talk about what happened. And then I actually have some good news in reference to the GrayZone's GoFundMe issue. Let's get into it.
So we are now going to bring in the founding editor and reporter, Max Blumenthal, who has done a lot of great investigative journalism reporting over the years and whose site GrayZone is one that I use frequently, even though I don't always agree with it. Like, I'm sure Max doesn't always agree with my journalism either, but it's one of the most reliable sites in my view for getting good, critically minded, independent reporting about U.S. foreign policy. I'm grateful the GrayZone exists, and I'm very appreciative, Max, for you taking the time to join us tonight on System Update. Welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for supporting us here, and thanks for using our site. We don't have a warning label yet, but
yeah, well, you need one because you are apparently very dangerous. You are making the world unsafe for all kinds of people in ways that it's even too dangerous for these sites to explain how you're unsafe. That's how dangerous you are. So let's first of all talk about how you've been using GoFundMe before you got this shutdown notice. What is it that you've been using GoFundMe to do?
Well, this was the first time we ever used GoFundMe. We were advised not to, but I thought maybe I was naive. We wanted to fundraise to provide basically a stable future for 3 journalists that I've been working with for a long time, who I think are 3 of the best young investigative reporters out there and who've been supplying us with so much journalistic content. Kit Clarenberg, Wyatt Reed, and Alex Rubenstein.
So Alex Rubenstein has been on this show before. Wyatt Reed has been on RBN. I think Kit may have also been on RBN. Anyway, we've spoken to all of these journalists. Wyatt Reed was at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I got to speak to him in person. He's actually on the stream there towards the end of the stream. We're walking and talking and stuff like that. They do really great work. You can find their articles, obviously, on the GrayZone. And yeah, that money was for them. That's why this is crazy.
And people were enthusiastic about this fundraiser. None of it was going to go to me. This is just a way for our audience to directly support the future of the kind of journalism that they really care about. And after over 1,100 donations, really showcasing so much grassroots support, hundreds of enthusiastic messages, and raising over $90,000. I received a message from someone named Sabrina, who could have been in a call center, who knows where.
Not me. Not me. I'm sorry. Someone DM'd me the other night. I think it was last night. Someone DM'd me and said, "Are you the Sabrina?" No, not me. I don't work for GoFundMe. There are many more Sabrinas. Let's go back.
From the ironically named Trust and Safety team of GoFundMe. And they told me that due to some external concerns, those are Sabrina's exact words, our funds had been frozen, and they would let me know as soon as possible what was going to happen. We'll keep you updated. And they didn't keep me updated. There was no response, no due process. I had no idea who I was talking to. 9 days later, or 8 days later, I just decided to call it quits. I mean, it wasn't fair to our donors that they didn't even know that their money was not even being transferred to us. It was being held up. And the history that you just provided of GoFundMe shows how shady this organization is. They actually tried to take the money, like to commit a warrantless seizure of the money of the donors to the Canadian Freedom Convoy.
Isn't that criminal? Like for GoFundMe to take that money where people donated that money for a particular cause. So if I'm donating $100, I'm donating to this particular cause, and that's where I want that money to go. For GoFundMe to take my money, my donation, and use it for something else, isn't that criminal? I might have to read some of the some of the legal terms around these apps like GoFundMe. Really, because I would be upset if I donated my money to one thing and they decided to use it, not the GrayZone, but GoFundMe decided to use it for something else.
Donate that money to, in their words, established charities instead of the truckers.
Right. People donated their money to a specific cause that they supported, and GoFundMe was going to take that money and give it to some other charity not requested by those people, steal their money and give it to some other group, whether that group was supported by the people donating or not. That is theft.
Yep. They were going to steal the money, that 10 million Canadian dollars, steal the money and just give it to some other charities. I mean, this is unheard of, and it was only thanks to actually U.S. lawmakers, Republican governors and Republican senators threatening GoFundMe, which is a U.S.-based, Silicon Valley-based company, that they relinquished the money and gave it back to its rightful owners. And so our fear was that that could happen again, so we said, hell no. We put out an article and a bulletin, an email blast to everyone telling them, demand a refund and go to a new fundraising page that we've set up at a trustworthy site called Spot Fund, where we've actually been in touch with the co-founder who said that they are 100% behind us and they're willing to transfer the money. They seem to be keeping their word. And so, yeah, I mean, thanks to everyone at Spot Fund for providing a trustworthy alternative to GoFundMe. And this goes to the question of who is behind this campaign, who represents the so-called external concerns.
Well, before we get into,
oh no, I meant to pause it. And Eric, can you get it back to? I think we had started at 40. Or never mind. I think I see it. All right, I'll get it back there. Okay, let me say something really quick. Let me see where I'm at. Hold on.
Of that law against journalists in the future.
No, we were further.
I thought it was so important that in order to retaliate against these attacks on a independent media, to do that.
Hold on.
Ukrainian warriors who continued. And
no, we were for that.
When we went to at the invitation of Patty Cosgrove, who's this.
Hold on, sorry.
As of virtually every establishment, Maven. Now, Max.
We'll pause there. Okay, let me say something really quick. There's something I wanted to tell you guys. I'm just thinking about something that I didn't think about when I chose the story. Do you guys remember when we covered a couple of weeks ago that there was the journalist on Twitter that thought he was calling out Max and Aaron because he said that Roger Waters donated $30,000 to the GrayZone? Do you guys remember when we covered that story? Okay, So that was GoFundMe, right? So on GoFundMe, you can see donations, like you can see who donated what and that kind of thing, right? Do you guys think that it's a little bit odd that here we are, not even a couple of weeks after that story broke, where this guy was trying to smear the GrayZone because they got that giant donation from Roger Waters? Do you think it's kind of strange that now GoFundMe chooses to hold the funds? Let that marinate. Think about that for a second. Think about it. I find it to be a little bit odd. It could just be a coincidence. Let's go back in. Let me make sure I'm at the right spot because I know Glenn came in. Okay.
Let's go ahead and tell that story.
So this disinformation huckster named Caroline Orbueno raised a bunch of money on GoFundMe. I'm going to pull it up right now to see how much she raised. Thousands of dollars to investigate Tulsi Gabbard's links to Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin at a time when Tulsi was under attack by the Democrats because she was the only anti-war candidate or moderately anti-war candidate. And what was Caroline Orbueno going to do? She was going to go to Hawaii to investigate those links. She never produced anything. She never turned anything up. So she basically fundraised for a Hawaiian vacation under the shadiest auspices possible, spreading disinformation in the process. And her fundraiser's still up at GoFundMe.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And this was...
Again, so that makes me think that they were reported. That makes me think that somebody, and I don't think it was probably just one, it was probably multiple people reported the GrayZone because they saw the amount of money that they were raising. And that's why when I saw that smear on Twitter, I was like, what are they trying to accomplish here? Right? Like the people who were smearing them. And that makes me wonder, did people report them because they saw they were raising that amount of money? People are so vindictive, you guys. You'd be surprised what people would do. I'm serious. You'd be surprised. So when GoFundMe says because of external circumstance, what external circumstances? What is the external issue? Is it the stories that the GrayZone covers? Is it because they don't parrot talking points from the State Department? Is that the external issue? Because this isn't the first time that something like this has happened. Last year, we talked about numerous people that were removed from PayPal, banned from PayPal, banned from Venmo. How you ban people from Venmo? Banned from Cash App, banned from GoFundMe because of the narrative that they have with their news. And so now you see it's happening also to the GrayZone. Whether you agree with these people or not, Jackson Hinkle got kicked off multiple cash apps, right? Whether you agree with his policies or not, or his news, what does that have to do with people choosing to donate money to his work? So one of the ways that they try to suppress the information and suppress the news from getting out to the people, you try to bankrupt the organization. You take money away from them. You prevent it. You make it so that people can't give them money for them to continue their news.
Widely discussed, this was widely reported at the time, it was widely documented that none of the promises she made to elicit those funds actually were ever realized or fulfilled. And of course, because she also had the right ideology, namely attacking a dissident to establishment orthodoxy, GoFundMe did nothing. GoFundMe does not care if you use GoFundMe to steal people's funds, to defraud well-intentioned people, as long as your politics are correct. And I'm going to state that so explicitly. I hope they sue me if they think that that's wrong. GoFundMe is a fraudulent company. It exists to help people steal money who have the right politics and to punish people who are using the funds for what it's promised, including journalistic outlets, if they have the wrong politics, as the GrayZone does in the eyes of virtually every establishment maven. Now, Max, we were going to have Clip Kernberg on our show, I think, 6 weeks ago, and it turned out not to work out. I ended up having to cancel a couple of shows during that week for personal reasons. But talk about what happened with that reporter who was going to or will be hired by GrayZone using these funds, and the reason that they were going to come on our show.
This is important too.
Yeah, I mean, this financial sabotage by GoFundMe and the powerful elements behind it, follows a campaign of repression, state repression against our personnel or our would-be personnel. Kit Clarenberg in May was taken off a plane that had landed at Luton International Airport in the UK. He's a British citizen. By counter-terror police, he was taken into a room and he was interrogated for 8 hours about his work for the GrayZone. And his work for the GrayZone, he has revealed many covert intelligence intrigues spun out by the British state to, for example, plan terrorist attacks against Russian infrastructure. He's exposed Paul Mason, the British supposedly left-wing journalist and possible candidate for parliament on the Labour slate, as a security state collaborator. And it's this kind of journalism that wound Kit Clarenberg up in a windowless room with counter-terror police. We also have Wyatt Reed, who
and just to remind people, during the Snowden reporting, one of the many forms of retaliation we received was when my husband, David Miranda, was traveling back to Brazil from visiting Laura Poitras in Germany, where he was in part taking a part of the archive that had become corrupted that she had fixed. He was also detained exactly under that same law, accused of terrorism for his work with journalists on journalism, put also into that probably the same room, windowless room for 8 hours, cut off from outside contact, wouldn't let him speak to me or to the Guardian's reporters, was threatened the entire time with prison, was only released because the Brazilian government raised such a diplomatic scandal with the British government that they were forced to release him, and then he won a lawsuit prohibiting the use of that law against journalists in the future on the grounds that it violates the EU Human Rights Convention of Freedom of the Press. And so that amazed me that they used that law, it seems, against Kit Clarenberg in retaliation for his journalism. But go ahead and tell the other story that you wanted to mention, I think, about Wyatt.
Yeah, so in reference to Kit Clarenberg, that was probably one of the craziest stories I heard, because again, like, he is a resident of the UK and he was detained in his own home country. Obviously, journalists do have to travel sometimes, right? And sometimes that travel could be international travel. So they were basically trying to hold Kit Clarenberg accountable because of his international travel, but not just because of that, but because of who he works for. One of the things that when they interrogated him, I remember reading that article, one of the questions that they continued to ask Kit was, what do you do at the GrayZone? What is the GrayZone? That kind of thing, right? So they're a target. The GrayZone is a target. It's not just them. Like Mint Press News, same thing. I would say antiwar.com. Also, like a lot of these, anti-war publications, so to speak, are heavily attacked. I'll let him finish and tell you about Wyatt, and then I'm going to tell you the good news.
Yeah, well, I should also mention the National Union of Journalists condemned Kit's detention, and then Paul Mason's allies intimidated the National Union of Journalists to retracting that statement of condemnation. And they said Kit is harassing people, Kit is involved in all kinds of disinformation activities, but they never said what that harassment or disinformation constituted or consisted of. And it's just simply that he was exposing powerful people. And you're not supposed to do that in the UK. You're supposed to be a stenographer for power. So the top union that's supposed to represent journalists totally sold him out. We've had this happen again and again. Wyatt Reed, no one spoke up for him when PayPal and Venmo financially sanctioned him, basically blocked him from receiving any kind of payment. This happened just like 3 or 4 weeks after he had been in Donetsk on the separatist side of the Donbass, reporting on Ukrainian human rights abuses, when Wyatt's own hotel in Donetsk city was shelled, and he filmed it. He was 100 meters away from a US supplied howitzer hitting his hotel. So you're not supposed to do that. He never received any explanation from PayPal or Venmo. Me and Aaron Mate, when we went to, at the invitation of Patty Cosgrove, who's the CEO of Web Summit, the largest gathering of the international tech industry in Lisbon, Portugal. We found out on our way there that thanks to pressure from Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and his wife Olena, who was due to appear at that conference, we had been removed as speakers. And we constantly faced this pressure campaign. Aaron himself was the target of a lobbying campaign by the Ukrainian SBU security services, which was working through the FBI to pressure Twitter to remove users it didn't like. And Aaron, a Canadian citizen, was on that list. Twitter, this is under the old regime before Elon, thought that was even too much.
That was a step too far even for Twitter to have the FBI basically handing over Ukrainian intelligence list of American journalists or North American journalists who they dislike. You know, obviously the war in Ukraine is the CIA's top foreign policy priority. It's the top foreign priority of the entire foreign policy establishment in the West, and people who have been opposed to that war from the start, including doing reporting that undercuts the lies and the narratives that are told, are being targeted with genuine kind of persecution campaigns. I was put on various lists as well by the Ukrainian government, along with a bunch of other people who I proudly serve with as alleged propagandists of the Russian government in the eyes of President Zelensky for daring to question the idea that we should fund that war to the end. Max, let me ask you.
Okay, and you guys can see the rest of the interview there on Glenn Greenwald's channel, but I do want to share some good news. But yes, that's true. This is what they do. They target those people, those anti-war voices, especially those that have a different narrative in reference to the Ukraine war. They target you by hitting your pocket. They target you financially. They make it so that you cannot continue to report on what you're reporting on, right? But there is good news. So take that, GoFundMe. Kit Clarenberg actually reported the good news. Breaking, the GrayZone News second crowdfunder has already raised even more than the first. Despite best efforts of British terror police, PayPal, GoFundMe, NAFO, and many others to knock us down, we bounce back stronger than ever each time, and we have our readers to thank. So yeah, it says defend the GrayZone independent journalism against the state. And you'll see that they've already raised, I think it's even higher than this now, because I looked at this earlier this morning. So that amount may be more now. But at this point in time, they had already raised over $93,000, which is great, which is absolutely great. And Kit does go on to say, respectful reminder to all GrayZone News supporters who so humbly gave to GoFundMe. You can easily cancel your donation and get a refund, while also, if you wish, lodging a complaint. We don't expect you to repurpose. Key thing is getting your money back. And I totally hear you there, Kit. He also said that Roger Waters increased his donation to a second time round. So thank you for your contribution to our journalism. Every little bit helps. So a happy ending to that story, which is good news. Thank you, Kim. Kim says it's 110,000 now. So that is awesome. So even more than they had originally raised on GoFundMe. Isn't that based? Thank you for this, Eric. So here is the new GrayZone fundraiser. That's spotfund.com story. And so I guess the rest of you, we can all just give a big FU to GoFundMe. And I think I will be very cautious about using GoFundMe going forward. We're going to have to switch to something else for mutual aid events. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. JB said, I had Wyatt Reed on my channel as well. That's right. Kim says, probably Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Yeah, I know. When I first heard this story, I was like, it's not me, not this Sabrina.